What's up, fellow Big Ten nuts out there in YouTube land? I'm Andy Coppens, Talking 10 Publisher, and this here is the B1G Rewind Show. You know the drill. We hit the rewind button on the weekend that was in Big Ten football, bringing you the best, the worst, and everything in between from the weekend that was. So, let's hit that button for Week 5, shall we? As per usual, we start the B1G Rewind Show with the biggest win of the week. This week, that's the Maryland Terrapins. There are no such things as moral victories, especially in conference play. But there are such things as winning and getting a major boost. And that's exactly what happened for Maryland on Saturday as they went on the road and got a 31-24 victory over the Minnesota Gophers. Most people left the Terps for dead after seeing Max Bortenschlager struggle in replacing the injured Kasim Hill last weekend, myself included. He was an efficient game manager this week though, going 18 of 28 for 154 yards, but he also had a pair of touchdowns in his first start of the season. Oh, and the Terps' powerful run game returned in a major way as well, as Ty Johnson had 130 yards and a touchdown on just 18 carries. All of that against a supposedly stout and impressive Gophers defense to this point in the season. And we could easily say this was the most shocking win of the weekend too. I mean, Maryland winning on the road against a Big Ten West opponent? Well, guess what? Maryland set itself up nicely for a realistic chance at back-to-back bowl games to start the Durkin era with this win. On the flip side of things, the worst loss of the week goes to the Iowa Hawkeyes. For the second straight week, it's their honor. In fact, last week it was for a heartbreaking loss. This week, it was for laying a massive egg on the road following said heartbreaking loss to Penn State. We were worried going into this contest that loss could snowball, and it certainly seemed to play out that way. No doubt that playing on the road in the Big Ten is no joke, and it's not a lot of fun for anybody. But Iowa's offense sputtered and couldn't get out of its own way at times. Case in point, this fumble by quarterback Nathan Stanley. I mean, he did that just as his team was nearing the goal line and seemingly ready to tie up the ball game. Whoops. Now, if that doesn't sum up what is happening for the Hawkeyes right now, I don't know really what will. Stanley was an awful 16 of 31 for 192 yards and a goose egg on the TD front. Meanwhile, Akram Wadley, the supposed star running back, had no room to run, racking up just 30 yards on the ground. Meanwhile, Michigan State squeezed 2 touchdowns out of a mediocre, and credit to Iowa's defense for this, offensive day themselves. There was nothing pretty about what happened for either team in East Lansing, to be sure. No matter what, Iowa lost a game it needed to have in order to stay in the Big Ten West Division race. Spotting Wisconsin 2 games, with 2 games played in conference play, that certainly puts Iowa behind a massive 8-ball in the West Division race. The win that makes us go, that's the Ohio State Buckeyes this week. Normally this category is for head-scratching wins, but in the case of the Ohio State Buckeyes, I'm saying, could this team be a national title contender after all? Yes, it was a win against the lowly Rutgers Scarlet Knights, who have nothing on offense. But finally, Ohio State looked like a real player on the national scene. It dominated the stat sheet and the scoreboard for what is my actual favorite victory they've had so far this season. And no doubt, the Scarlet Knights offense probably couldn't score on a high school defense. At least the Rutgers defense had come along so far this season. Then that freight train named the Ohio State Buckeyes hit, and it resulted in a 56-0 beatdown in Piscataway. JT Barrett looked great, throwing for 275 yards and 3 touchdowns, adding another 89 yards on the ground, and then little-used running back DeMario McCall led the team in rushing with 103 yards. OSU's defense was equally impressive, holding Rutgers under 100 yards passing and to just 117 yards, 2.9 yards per carry, on the ground. When you can show you can dominate like that in conference play, it has to make you wonder if the Buckeyes are starting to finally piece it all together at just the right time. Player of the Week honors, that's Penn State's wide receiver, Deshaun Hamilton. We haven't talked about the team everyone seems to be jumping on board with as a true national title contender yet. Well, Penn State has our Player of the Week as Deshaun Hamilton had himself a career day. No, really. As in, he is the career leader in receptions at Penn State after hauling in 9 catches for 122 yards and 3 touchdowns in the Nittany Lions' 45-14 beating of Indiana inside Happy Valley. He had one of the better sideline catches this season as well, and that one just happened to break the career receptions mark as well. He leapt, twisting his body, and somehow got both feet down well in bounds before hitting the rest of his body out of bounds. Easy call here. Hamilton, he gets the nod as the Player of the Week, although we did think long and hard about a defensive stud named Garrett Dooley at Wisconsin. All he did was have 8 tackles, 3 sacks, and 4.5 tackles for loss in Wisconsin's big win over Northwestern. Up next, it's our 5 B1G lessons, and lesson number 1 is a team we just got done talking about, the Wisconsin Badgers. Folks, they're for real. UW played one weak-ass non-conference schedule, and it rolled through like a contender really should. But Week 5 presented the first quality opponent of the season for the Badgers, and while the final score of 33-24 says it was close, Wisconsin steamrolled the Wildcats out of intermission, and only a furious late rally made it somewhat close. The good news for Badger fans is that Wisconsin played arguably its worst offensive game of the season and still managed to score 24 of UW's 33 points. Meanwhile, Jim Leonhard took advantage of the bye week and unleashed his defense to the tune of 8 sacks, 11 tackles for loss, and 2 interceptions, one of which was returned for a touchdown. Oh, and there was a safety as well. UW showed its best football is in front of it and still won against arguably the Big Ten West Division's second best team. I know, not saying much so far, but that's good news for the Badgers, for sure. Takeaway number 2, Walt Bell put up a masterclass as Terp's offensive coordinator. Now, it was clear that the game plan for Maryland's offense in this game with Kasim Hill out was vastly different with Kasim Hill in at quarterback, because when Max Bortenschlager went in last week, it didn't work. He could not execute that game plan. However, with a week to prep, Walt Bell called a masterpiece of a game for his new starting quarterback to succeed with. Bortenschlager wasn't called on to be the focal point of the offense, but a scary compliment, as in scary enough for defenses to have to respect him. It helped running backs Ty Johnson and Lorenzo Harrison III put up a combined 205 yards on the ground in the Terps' 31-24 victory. Maryland fans have to love the fact that while its defense continues to struggle at times, its offense is back to picking up the pieces and succeeding in outscoring opponents. It's the formula Maryland needs to get to win, and it got just that on Saturday. Now, about getting back to bowl eligibility. Number 3 on our takeaway list here, well, Tanner Lee bounced back for the Huskers. Let's travel all the way back to Friday night in the sleepy and half-full confines of Memorial Stadium in Champaign, Illinois, shall we? All that was witnessed was Illinois' continued offensive ineptitude and Tanner Lee getting a chance to redeem himself after a dreadful few weeks. All he did was go 17 of 24 for 246 yards, and most importantly, not 1, not 2, but 3 touchdowns to none zippo interceptions. The confidence gathered in this one has to be a good sign, and the hope that the corner has actually turned for Lee and the Huskers offense, especially because the Wisconsin Badgers await them next week in their own Memorial Stadium. Number 4 on my list here, that's Johnny Dixon staked his claim as OSU's go-to wide receiver. Now, part of the problem for OSU's passing attack this season is that it has been wholly one-dimensional. If it wasn't Paris Campbell, it wasn't working. Instead, this weekend, Johnny Dixon emerged from the shadows. He caught 3 passes for a team-high 115 yards and a wholly efficient 2 touchdowns. That's right, 3 catches, 2 touchdowns. The explosive plays were what impressed me the most here. Now sure, it came against Rutgers, but at least someone showed that they could get loose on the edge for Ohio State. It's a welcome sight in Buckeye land. And guess what? Number 5, the 5th and final takeaway in my 5 B1G lessons, Michigan State's defense is ready for prime time. It's fair to say Iowa and Michigan's offenses are similar in 2017. Both have some explosive players available to them, but have produced well below expectations and have fans scratching their heads. That should be good news for the Spartans, who continue to showcase the defense that has been their hallmark under Mark D'Antonio. MSU bottled up Akram Wadley, made Nate Stanley uncomfortable, and were physical at the point of attack. It was fun to watch that defense work on Saturday afternoon in East Lansing for sure. It also showed up against an opponent as desperate as it was after bad losses in Week 4. With in-state rival Michigan under the lights in Ann Arbor coming up, well, the Spartans at least can hang their hats on having a defense just about an equal footing to what Michigan has produced thus far this season. And that does it for the B1G Rewind Show for Week 5. Don't forget to subscribe here on YouTube and tell all your friends to do the same. Independent journalism depends on it, and that's just what we are, independent journalists. Until next week, keep on living the B1G life.